My name is Lena Marlowe, and I'm 33 years old. When I first met Ethan, he made life feel effortless, like everything serious could wait until tomorrow. He had that kind of smile that promised adventure but never commitment, and back then, I found that charming. I was 25, a newly certified nurse, exhausted from night shifts, but full of hope. He was 26, working in IT and moonlighting as a drummer with a few college friends. We met at a concert he was playing backup, nothing fancy, but I remember how his eyes lit up when he saw me in the crowd. We were inseparable after that. Coffee dates became weekends together, and weekends turned into shared rent. I used to tell my friends he was the calm to my chaos. Funny thing, over time, I realized he was the chaos and I was the one constantly cleaning up after it. When we first moved in together, I thought I'd discovered domestic bliss. That illusion lasted about a week. Ethan was messy, an almost creative kind of messy. Socks under the couch, half-empty coffee mugs colonizing the counter, his laundry blending with mine as if marriage meant automatic maid service. I'd work a 12-hour hospital shift, come home to the smell of takeout boxes, and still find myself scrubbing his dishes while he jammed in the living room, drumming on his thighs. He'd look up with that easy grin. "Babe, you work too hard. Come sit. Let's just chill." I'd want to scream. But I didn't. Not at first. I told myself he just needed time to adjust. That love was patience. That he'd grow up eventually. When it came to money, though, patience was a luxury I couldn't afford. Ethan's idea of budgeting was, if my card still swipes, I'm fine. He'd spend on new symbols, gadgets, subscriptions he never used. So I took over. Bills, savings, everything. He didn't argue, he just called me his CFO. He said it with affection, but I heard the hidden complaint underneath. Then there was his mother, Margaret. I met her 6 months into dating. She had that polished kind of smile, the one that doesn't reach her eyes. "So you're the nurse," she said, shaking my hand as if testing my grip strength. Ethan always needed someone practical. He's an artist, not a planner. Her voice carried pride and warning in equal measure. Margaret never yelled, never insulted outright, but every compliment came dipped in acid. "You've really tamed my boy," she'd say at family dinners. He used to be so spontaneous. Now he folds his laundry on Thursdays. Ethan would laugh awkwardly. I'd laugh too. That was easier than admitting it hurt. Over the years, my home became a stage where I performed patience. Ethan would promise to pick up after himself, only to forget hours later. I'd correct him gently at first, then with quiet exhaustion. He'd apologize, strum his fingers on the table, and tell me I'll do better. And I'd believe him, because loving him meant believing in potential. We'd been married 5 years when the first real crack appeared, not in the walls of our house, but between us. It wasn't loud or sudden, it was the quiet kind of distance that builds when one person keeps giving and the other keeps taking without noticing. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling. I told myself it was just stress from work, but deep down I knew something was breaking. Then came the phone call. My uncle, the one who'd raised me on summer weekends, who taught me how to drive and to always keep a first aid kit in my car, was gone. Heart attack sudden. He'd been alone. The silence after the call was heavier than any sound. Ethan was next to me, scrolling on his phone. When I told him, he looked up, said, "Oh, babe, I'm sorry," then went back to his feed. That night I sat in bed staring at the ceiling while he snored beside me. My grief pressed against my chest like something alive, and for the first time in years, I thought I am so alone, even in this bed. A week later, the will was read. My mother and I inherited his entire fortune, half each. The number on paper didn't even register at first. It felt wrong to think about money when all I wanted was another chance to say goodbye. But I didn't realize then that inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a spark, and soon it would burn down everything I'd built. Grief changes the texture of time. Days blur into each other. Mornings feel like nights, and everything sounds a little muffled. After the funeral, all I wanted was silence. But Ethan wanted plans. An hour after we came home from the cemetery, he opened a beer, plopped on the couch, and said, "So we're rich now." I remember turning to him, my black dress still wrinkled from the service. "Excuse me." He grinned, oblivious to the look on my face. "I mean, babe, think about it. You can finally relax, maybe cut down your hospital hours. And He paused, eyes gleaming. "I can quit that damn IT job. Go full-time with my band. Really give drumming a shot." For a second, I thought it was a joke. Then I realized he was serious. I felt something inside me crack. Ethan, my uncle, just died. Can you not talk about money right now? He blinked confused. I'm just saying it's a blessing in disguise. You know he'd want you to enjoy it. And maybe this is a sign for both of us to finally chase what makes us happy. That word us set me off. Us, Ethan, that inheritance is mine. My uncle left it to me. His face changed, hurt, disbelief, then anger. Wow. So that's how it is? You think because it's in your name I don't get a say. We're married. Lena, what's yours is mine, right? I didn't even recognize my own voice when I replied. Not when you treat money like a toy. You can't even pay a bill on time without me reminding you. We went at it for over an hour, voices rising, accusations flying. He said I'd never supported his dreams, that I made him feel small, controlled like a child. I shouted back that he was a child, an overgrown one with a drum set instead of a job. At one point he yelled, "You don't love me, you just manage me." That one hurt, because part of me knew he was right. Somewhere between all the schedules and responsibilities, I had started treating him like a project I needed to fix. When it was over, he slammed the door and went for a drive. I stayed in the kitchen shaking. The clock ticked louder than my heartbeat. I wanted to apologize, but the words felt stuck in my throat. For the next few days, the house went cold. We lived side by side, but didn't speak. I cooked, he ordered takeout. We slept on opposite sides of the bed, back to back, separated by more than just blankets. Still, I caught him looking at me sometimes like he was waiting for me to break the silence. But I didn't. Because even though I'd said what I said in anger, everything he'd thrown back at me came from truth he'd been storing for years. On the fourth morning, he finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost rehearsed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. You're right, it was bad timing. I exhaled, feeling the tension in my chest loosen. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. I just needed space. He nodded. Let's not ruin everything over one fight, okay? I wanted to believe him. I really did. It was our 5th wedding anniversary that day, and I was desperate for peace. Then he added Mom's hosting a dinner tonight. For us. To celebrate. She says it's a big surprise. Margaret. Of course. The woman never missed an opportunity to insert herself. I don't think I'm up for that, I said carefully. Please, Lena. She's actually trying this time, and after everything, it might be good for us. He smiled the same boyish smile that used to melt me years ago. I promise it'll be quick. Then we can plan that weekend trip you wanted. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it was just dinner one evening. That afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror, curling my hair, trying to convince myself I was doing the right thing. Maybe his mother was trying to be kind. Maybe the fight had scared Ethan enough to grow up a little. But when we pulled up to Margaret's mansion that night, lights glowing, cars lined up outside. Music spilling from the windows, something in my gut twisted. She'd gone all out. Silver decorations, champagne towers, a 3-tiered cake that read, "To New Beginnings." New beginnings of what exactly? I smiled for the cameras, for the guests, for Ethan's hand resting proudly on my back. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Something's wrong. You're walking into something you won't be able to walk out of unchanged." Margaret's house looked like it had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Every corner gleamed under soft golden light. Crystal glasses sparkled on the table, and the air carried a mix of perfume and roasted rosemary chicken. I'd been to this house dozens of times, but that night it felt unfamiliar like a stage, and I was walking into a play where I didn't know my lines. Margaret appeared from the crowd, radiant, in a sequined dress that screamed, "Look at me." She hugged Ethan tightly, kissing his cheek, then turned to me with a practiced smile. "Lena," she said sweetly, "I'm glad you could make it. I know how busy you always are." There it was, the subtle barb wrapped in politeness. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied evenly. "The house looks beautiful." "It does, doesn't it?" She turned to the guests, raising her voice just enough. "Well, my son finally gave me a reason to celebrate." Her words prickled. Finally. What about 5 years of marriage, of anniversaries she'd ignored? I brushed the thought aside and followed Ethan through the crowd. People I barely knew greeted us like we were royalty. Ethan looked restless, distracted. I leaned closer and whispered, "Do you know what's going on?" He avoided my eyes. "Just go with it, okay?" My chest tightened. "Ethan, what did you tell her?" He forced a smile. "Nothing bad. I'll explain later." Before I could press him, Margaret clinked a glass, commanding the room's attention. "Everyone, please. A toast to my wonderful son." The room quieted. I expected a generic anniversary speech. Instead, her words fell like glass shattering on tile. My son, Ethan Marlowe, is finally following his heart. After years of dedication and hard work, He's achieved the financial independence to retire early and pursue his true passion, music. Applause erupted. I froze. Margaret beamed at Ethan, eyes shining with pride. He has always been my brave boy, unafraid to chase his dreams, even when others tried to hold him back. Her gaze slid toward me, pointed and sharp. And tonight I couldn't be prouder. He's shown that persistence and talent can overcome any obstacle. A few people turned to look at me. Some smiled awkwardly. My throat went dry. I turned to Ethan, my whisper trembling. What the hell is she talking about? He leaned closer, barely moving his lips. I told her I saved enough money to quit my job. My pulse roared in my ears. You what? She wouldn't understand about the inheritance, he muttered quickly. I didn't want her thinking I was living off you. I was going to tell you later. I stared at him numb. So you lied to her, to everyone about money that isn't even yours? Lena, please, he hissed, eyes darting toward his mother. Don't make a scene. But it was already too late. The heat of humiliation spread through me. The guests laughed and cheered, raising glasses to his success. Margaret's words replayed in my mind. He did it without any support. Without support. As if the years I spent working double shifts, paying rent, managing every damn bill, meant nothing. Margaret continued basking in the applause. It takes real courage to follow your dreams, even when the people closest to you don't believe in you. I raised a man who refuses to settle for less than happiness. The room blurred, my vision tunneled, until all I could see was Ethan, silent, complicit. My husband, the same man who had promised to protect me, was sitting there letting his mother humiliate me in front of everyone. I forced a smile that hurt my cheeks. Excuse me for a moment, I said, pushing back my chair. Margaret smirked. Leaving so soon, dear. The night's just beginning. I turned to face her fully. Oh, I'm not leaving yet. The room quieted again. Forks stopped clinking. A low buzz of curiosity rippled through the guests. Ethan grabbed my hand under the table. Lena, don't. But I was done being quiet. For years, I had cleaned up his messes in silence. Tonight, that silence ended. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but cold. Since we're celebrating truth tonight, I think everyone should know what's really happening. The room went still. Margaret's smile faltered. Ethan's grip tightened on my hand, but I pulled away. This little retirement story, I said, isn't the result of Ethan's hard work. The money he's planning to live off of came from my inheritance money left to me by my uncle who just passed away. A few gasps. Someone dropped a fork. And the truth is, I continued my tone sharper now. The only thing Ethan has worked hard at these past years is spending faster than he earns. I've covered his bills, cleaned up his debts, and managed his life while he played pretend at being a rock star. Margaret stood flustered. Lena, that's enough. No, Margaret, I said, locking eyes with her. What's enough is this constant charade that your son's a self-made man. The truth is, you didn't raise a dreamer. You raised a man who still needs a babysitter. A stunned silence filled the room. Ethan's face was pale, his jaw trembling. My parents, seated at the corner table, exchanged a knowing look. No shock, just quiet approval. I took my purse, my coat, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear whispers ripple through the crowd. Ethan called out, Lena, please wait. But I didn't. I stepped outside into the night air, trembling but lighter. I drove until the city lights faded in the rearview mirror, until I found a small hotel by the highway and checked in under my maiden name. Sitting alone in that quiet room, I realized how long it had been since I'd felt this kind of silence. Real silence, the kind that doesn't hide resentment underneath. I picked up my phone. Dozens of texts from Ethan, all unread. I turned it face down and whispered to no one, I think this marriage just ended over dinner. When I woke up the next morning in that hotel room, the world was still heavy with the echo of my own voice. My words from last night replayed in my head like a film on loop, each one sharp, deliberate, impossible to take back. The phone on the nightstand was still lighting up every few minutes, 23 missed calls, 47 unread messages, all from Ethan. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. My reflection looked older, harder. I wasn't crying anymore. I'd cried enough over this man through the years, quiet, invisible tears he never noticed. Last night hadn't been an outburst. It was a release. Still, I couldn't stop replaying that dinner in my mind the second before I stood up. The tremor in my hands, the stillness that followed when I spoke. I could still see Margaret's face as the words left my mouth, her perfect composure cracking like porcelain. Your son didn't build anything, I had told her. He's been living off my effort, my discipline, and now my inheritance. If he's retiring, it's because I've been working for two. The crowd had frozen. Forks hung midair. I remembered Ethan's desperate whisper. Please, Lena. Don't do this here. But I had to. For 5 years, I'd been quiet. I'd smiled through disrespect, through exhaustion, through his mother's backhanded jabs. But that night, surrounded by champagne and false praise, something inside me refused to stay small anymore. After I spoke, I didn't look back. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I left. Ethan followed me halfway to the car, calling my name, but I kept walking. I didn't even feel angry then, just empty. Now, sitting in that hotel room, I finally let the anger in. Not the shouting kind, but the cold kind that sits under your ribs and makes you see things with painful clarity. I had spent years parenting my husband, teaching him how to pay bills, how to plan, how to live responsibly. I had convinced myself that his recklessness was endearing, that his boyish charm was lovable. But it wasn't charm, it was avoidance. It was me carrying both our weights while he chased a fantasy of freedom. And Margaret God, she was the architect of all this. She'd spent his entire life telling him he was exceptional, that he didn't need to change, that the world would bend to his talent. I was the first person to tell him otherwise, and she hated me for it. When my phone buzzed again, I finally picked it up. Ethan, please just come home. I'll explain everything. I didn't mean to humiliate you, I swear. Ethan. Mom twisted things. I'll fix it. Ethan, I'm sorry. I read the messages twice, then set the phone down. It wasn't just what he'd done that night. It was every night before that, every time he'd promised to get serious and never did, every time he'd let me clean up his mess and called me controlling when I got tired. I thought about the first year of our marriage, how I'd fallen asleep on the couch after work, only to wake up to the sound of his drums echoing from the garage. How he'd kiss my forehead and whisper, "I'll make you proud someday." Maybe he believed that. Maybe I did too. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back home yet, but I needed closure. I texted him, "We'll talk tomorrow morning, at home, before work." Then I switched my phone off and stared at the rain again. The city below looked washed clean, but I knew better. Some stains don't fade, they just stop being visible. When I finally lay down that night, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow I'll know whether there's anything left to save." But deep down, I already knew the answer. When I got home the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the smell of coffee. Ethan never made coffee this early. He was sitting at the kitchen table, hair unkempt, eyes hollow. The same man who once bragged about sleeping through earthquakes now looked like he hadn't slept at all. He jumped up the moment I walked in. "Lena, thank God. I thought you weren't coming." I put my bag down, keeping my tone steady. "You said you wanted to explain, so explain." He swallowed hard. "Look, I messed up. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. I didn't plan the party. I didn't know Mom would." "Stop," I said. "You told her you quit your job because you'd saved enough money. You told her I supported it. Don't pretend you didn't." He opened his mouth, then shut it. His shoulders slumped. "Yeah, I told her that." "Why?" He rubbed his face. "Because I didn't want her judging me. You know how she is. She's always said I should do what makes me happy. I just wanted her off my back. Okay, I didn't think she'd throw a damn party. So instead of telling her the truth that you're depending on my inheritance, you lied, made yourself the hero, and made me the villain." He looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw something beyond guilt fear. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. "She twisted it. You know how she can be." I cut him off, my voice sharper now. "She didn't twist anything, Ethan. You handed her the story she wanted. You always do." He sighed, dragging a hand through his hair. "You think I enjoy being in the middle of this? Between you and her? I'm just trying to keep the peace." I laughed bitterly. "Keep the peace. You burned the peace to the ground and handed her the match." He looked at me helpless, like a child caught doing something stupid. I didn't know what else to do. "That's your problem," I said quietly. "You never know what else to do. You just drift and wait for someone else. Me, your mother, anyone to decide your life for you." He stepped closer. "I'm sorry, Lena. Please, I'll fix this. I'll talk to Mom. I'll tell everyone the truth." I took a step back. "No, you won't. Because you don't fix things, Ethan. You cover them up until they explode." He froze, and I realized he had no defense left. I turned toward the window. The morning light hit our wedding photo on the wall. Me smiling him in his tux, his arm around me like he'd caught something precious. I remembered how proud I'd been that day, thinking we were equals, partners, a team. But now looking at that photo, all I saw was imbalance, me leaning forward, him leaning on me. Ethan broke the silence. "What do you want me to say, that I'm a failure, that you were right all along?" I turned to face him. "No, Ethan. I want you to realize I'm done trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved." He shook his head, panic flickering in his eyes. "Lena, you don't mean that. We can get through this. We always do." I used to believe that, I said softly. But last night, when you sat there letting your mother humiliate me, I saw it clearly. You weren't my partner, Ethan. You were my responsibility. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. Please, don't say that. Don't do this. But I was already moving. I went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a suitcase. He followed me, his voice rising. You're not serious. I am. I started folding clothes. I've been serious for 5 years, Ethan. You just never noticed. He grabbed my wrist gently, almost pleading. I'll change Lena. I'll get another job. I looked at him, then really looked. The same hopeful eyes that had charmed me once were now the eyes of a man terrified to be alone. I believe you think that, I said quietly, but I don't believe you'll do it. His voice cracked. So that's it. You're walking away. I'm not walking away, I replied. I'm stepping out of the role you put me in. I zipped the suitcase. The sound was final, louder than any fight we'd ever had. Ethan leaned against the doorway, defeated. You'll regret this, maybe I said, but at least the regret will be mine. As I wheeled the suitcase past him, he whispered something I almost didn't catch. You were supposed to be on my side. I stopped. I was Ethan. For years. But you mistook that for servitude. I left the house without looking back. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was from fear or relief, maybe both. Driving away, I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of fixing, explaining, forgiving. And beneath that exhaustion, a small, strange spark of peace. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not Ethan, not his mother, not anyone. It's been 2 weeks since I walked out of that house, and I still wake up expecting to hear Ethan's drums echoing through the walls. But the only sound now is the hum of the ceiling fan and the city murmuring outside my new apartment window. Silence used to feel suffocating. Now it feels like oxygen. I didn't go back, not even to collect everything. My parents helped me send for the rest later. They didn't ask many questions, they'd seen enough through the years. My mother hugged me, whispering, You've carried that man long enough, sweetheart. And she was right. Ethan tried to reach out at first. Calls, texts, voicemails, apologies that all sounded the same. I didn't mean to. Mom twisted it. We can fix this. I didn't respond. Eventually, the tone shifted from guilt to desperation. You can't just erase 5 years. But I could, because those 5 years had already erased too much of me. A few days ago, I finally turned my phone back on after blocking his number. What surprised me wasn't his silence. It was the peace that followed it. For once, I wasn't waiting for anyone to change. That night, I opened my laptop and sent an email to a law firm my cousin recommended. The next morning, I was sitting across from a calm, confident lawyer who didn't flinch when I said the word divorce. She simply asked, Do you want this clean or scorched earth? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Clean, I said, but firm. The paperwork moved quickly. Money wasn't the issue. It was never about that. The inheritance is legally mine. Ethan has no claim. Still, I wanted everything done right. I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was closing a chapter of dependency denial and emotional exhaustion. When the papers were served, Ethan didn't reply. But the next day, Margaret showed up at my parents' house. My father answered the door before she could step in. She tried to sound sympathetic. I just want to talk to Lena, she said. She doesn't understand what she's doing. Ethan is devastated. They just need time. My father's voice was firm. Time's up. You've both done enough. Then he closed the door. That evening, I sat with my mother sipping tea, watching the sky turn violet. I told her about my plans to start a new job at the private clinic downtown to maybe travel a little. But what I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone, was what I planned to do with my inheritance. For years, I'd dreamed of becoming a mother. Ethan knew that. We'd tried, but nothing worked. Every doctor's appointment ended with disappointment, every test result another silent wound. He'd comfort me for a day or two, then escape into his music. I was always the only one holding on to hope. When I learned I'd inherited enough to change our lives, I imagined using it for IVF adoption, maybe even surrogacy, whatever gave us a chance. But Ethan never saw that money as a way to build a family. He saw it as an escape hatch from adulthood. That was the final fracture between us, even if I didn't know it then. Now sitting here, I realize that dream isn't gone. It's just no longer tied to him. Maybe I'll still pursue motherhood. Maybe I won't. For the first time, it's my choice alone. Last night, I found myself scrolling through old photos, Ethan and I at the beach, laughing arms around each other. We looked happy. But when I stared long enough, I noticed something I'd never seen before. I was always the one holding him, supporting, balancing. Never the other way around. I deleted the album. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for years. Today, I signed the final divorce papers. My lawyer handed me a pen and said, "Once you sign, you're officially free." I hesitated for a moment. Then I signed. My hand didn't shake. Walking out of that office, the sunlight hit my face so brightly I had to squint. But I didn't shield my eyes. I wanted to feel it, all of it. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, hopeful, forgiving, endlessly patient. I'm not her anymore. I'm not bitter either, just awake. As I walked down the steps, I whispered to myself, he was the storm. I was the shelter. But now I get to be the sky. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not because something was fixed, but because I was finally unbroken.